Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. I am Rich Maletto. I'm back again this week. The man, the myth, the legend who's been holding down the fort every week, all weeks, all the time, Sean Engel, who you can find on the Xbox machine at SeanE247. Remember, we spell that with 4 letters here at Fantasy Guru, SEAN for Sean. And back, the man, the guy that he prints money. I got to figure it out, but the guy just prints money. We got DFS Marlin back with us, Mark Hogan. Mark, man, I haven't been on here with you in a while, so it's great to see you again. Sean, it's great to see. Heck, we haven't really done a 3-person stream like this or podcast like this since we had Mark on as a guest. And hey,
yeah.
Now Mark's probably replacing me as a host at some point for all I know, man. You know, print money with DFS checks over there. But gentlemen, congrats to Mark he's been DFS winning in football and in NASCAR. So for those of you who don't know, tap into Mark's brain. He gives you he's already helped me win a couple of tournaments this year. He doesn't realize it yet after we had our conversation. Well, I guess not win, but top 10. Had our conversation there at the Expo. So the way he plays the game, he's smart, he's savvy. So listen up. And Sean was all over Ross Chastain last week, folks. So if you didn't collect money, don't blame him. You can blame me, but don't blame him.
Yeah, we talked up Ross Chastain a lot on the podcast last week. I even mentioned him in the Cup Series article during the past weekend as well. He ended up getting a lot of place differential. He ended up winning, leading the second most laps. Great weekend for Ross Chastain to play playoff spoiler right there. But we'll get to that when we get to Cup recap time.
And if you like winning and you like making money, you've come to the right place. But if you want to get more, take advantage of the Fantasy Guru buy one, get one. If you are into DFS playing, you want to dabble in betting, or maybe you're a bettor and you want to dabble in DFS, sign up for one of our DFS packages, get the betting package included for free. Or there's always the promo we always promote here, $39.99 for everything that's not football and baseball. Or Sean, did that change? I see a look over there. Did that change on us?
It's back to the original price right now for the Game Time MVP all-in package. $200 per annual or $60 per month. So I'm sure
$40.
If you talk to support though, maybe they can get you a better price than that.
Because folks, we've been pushing that $39.99 for about 8 months now. So we had it promoted for a while, or 6 months. Wow, you just missed out because that was a smoking package. Or here's a little tip for everybody: reach out to support. Try to get the all-in VIP, okay? I'm not sure what discounts they'll offer or anything else, but I'm going to let you all know a little secret. Don't wait for your renewal. Watch around May, June, and July. We always seem to have these early bird special promos. And, for example, this year, you could have gotten the all-in package for less than signing up for the DFS and betting package together. You could have gotten the all-in package that covers every sport. So just something to keep in mind, with the football season already started. If you reach out to Ted and ask very nicely, maybe offer to buy him a carton of cigarettes or something, see if he'll help you out. You can reach out at the email is support@fantasyguru.com.
Yep.
And tell him what you're looking for and what you want to sign up for. Otherwise, if you're good with football and you just, you want to add betting, you want DFS, you might as well get them both. Because I'll tell you right now, the wife will tell you she doesn't do a lot of DFS, but she reads all the DFS articles because she feels like it gives her an edge on the betting stuff. That there's plenty of information there, that insight that's shared that applies in other areas. She is a firm. Look, it's funny. We were just talking off air about all the questions I get. I live with this woman. Do you know how many questions I get from her? Maybe 2 a week. And that's if she's really twisted up on a couple of things. Otherwise, she don't really care what my opinion is. So take it for what it's worth. NASCAR, she does. She always asks me for NASCAR. So, Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. Like you said, it's huge with player props. You compare a player prop to a DFS price, and it helps you figure out who's mispriced a little bit easier. And that's what it comes down to, man, is finding those low end guys, those overlooked guys who are just mispriced or are misvalued and taking advantage. So I think at the end of the day, man, I will point out too, I personally, just as someone who is also a subscriber, VIP is the way to go. If you just get everything, because the more you can sharpen your process and your tool as far as any sport goes, the better off you're going to be across the board. When you combine process with quality information and quality knowledge and analysis, that's when you merge the two. That's when the most profits come in. So, end of the day, get involved. If you're playing year round, go on the all-in package, because it's going to improve your play and it's going to bring you home more money.
Yes.
True story. The wife has access to that now, right? And she was blown away. The elite data, for example, she loves the elite data for her prop bets and everything else. And Mark, we talked about this at the Expo, how in NASCAR, you were never per se a big NASCAR guy, but you enjoyed the content. You had some fun. You liked the action because, NASCAR kind of runs when a lot of other things aren't, right? Baseball can be a daily grind. Basketball can be a daily grind. A lot of us are busy during the week. The weekends are kind of nice for ourselves. And football and racing has always kind of provided that for me anyway. And we talked about how you love that, when we would put information in there so you could look at the DFS pricing and the odds, because you like to see where the variances is. That's a big deal to you. When someone is priced high on DFS, but yet their odds are a bit of a longer shot, that raises a red flag to you as far as why, what side is one missing versus the other, and vice versa. So your process, Mark, and we've talked about it briefly, has that, I put a lineup in, I told Sean about it, paid up. You mentioned this too, context selection. Sean, you've talked about this. Contest selection is not talked about enough. I mean, Jeff talks about it, but it is not talked about enough. I paid up because I just felt good about this lineup. Turned out the one guy I used, and where I didn't listen to Mark, shame on me, we always want to use all the money. Mark said a couple of things that stuck out of my head. One, if you're completely confident or comfortable with the lineup, it's probably not right. You should always have a little bit of uneasiness. This lineup I did, but I just felt so confident, and I never do, that I wanted to ride it, right? The other thing was, we all want to always use all our money. So I had 3 drivers I was willing to punt with. I had more money left over than I thought. So I went with the most expensive one instead of going with the one that caught my eye initially, right? Had I gone with the one that caught my eye initially, would have saved, I don't know, $500, $600, $700, not a big deal. I would have placed, instead of 8th in that tournament, I would have placed 2nd or 1st. So little things like that, go a long way. But let's get into the week. We'll get in more DFS later. I'm just excited. We don't normally get everybody here. The race this past weekend was pretty decent. Again, Sean, you're going to have to carry me on Xfinity. I have it fixed now. Though. So now I can watch.
Woo! Score one for Rich finally being able to see stuff. That's a win right there. Total
Do you know what's funny? Do you know what it took to be able to see stuff? A $35 antenna like we used to use when I was like 5 years old.
There you go.
You know what I'm talking about? I know I'm a little old.
The rabbit tails?
They're not rabbit tails or rabbit ears, but now they're digital, but it's the same kind of concept. I've got this teardrop looking thing that's an antenna that plugs into the antenna portal on the back of the TV, along with the USB thing to run power. And now I am pulling what we used to call in college peasant vision, because everybody can get it for free. So I have now got peasant vision on the secondary TV. So I can now finally watch the Xfinity races.
Awesome. Love to hear it, especially because we only have a couple more weeks left of Xfinity action for the year. And this is the part of the year where it really starts to get intense for those drivers too.
It's been fun. I can't lie. The Xfinity race has been good. The truck race has been good. We'll cover Cup. But for the trucks in Xfinity, I've been very pleased the last month of the season.
You know what? Let's talk about the Truck Series race here. Let's get ourselves started with that. So, Truck Series, Corey Heim. It was Heim time once again. He gets his 6th victory of the year, slipping past Ty Majeski, who ran out of fuel coming to the white flag there. And basically, Heim, he won over Lane Riggs and Christian Eckes there. How about that?
Hey, how about hat tip for Lane on the big track? What'd I tell you? Coming back to the big track, man, I was digging me some Lane Riggs, right? And look, when Heim has a situation, I hope someone took advantage when I said in the article, live bet or wait and see how practice went. There was no reason to bet him at plus 300. When he ended up starting in the back at 33rd, and I was busy, I did not get to see the lines. I'm guessing his line moved to maybe 500 or 600 or something like that, I would at that point, when they went to the back of the field, I was more convinced Heim was going to have a good week. Little tip that people don't realize. When they have to go to the back of the pack because they have to fix things on the car, replace the motor. I don't know why this is, but they always are faster. I used to target motor changes. When we used to change motors all the time, I used to go, oh, who changed their motor after qualifying? So-and-so? Because they fine-tune those motors or used to so much that, hey, we don't have the extra 100 miles from practice or 50 miles from practice and qualifying. So we're going to tune her just a little bit more. And that little bit more was enough to make you faster than everybody else. So just a little tip, when the studs struggle like that and go to the back, don't fade them, play them.
Yeah, that was definitely an important lesson, especially if you took note of that fact during this past weekend in Cup. And again, I'm getting ahead of myself here. That paid off for you big time this week.
Yep.
But continuing on with the truck race, Grant Enfinger, who finished 9th, he took the final playoff spot into the next round of the playoffs over Ben Rhodes and Daniel Dye, who are eliminated from championship contention after they finished 22nd and 27th, respectively, guys.
And boy, Ben Rhodes had me twisted. They had that prototype car I didn't know about, so then I wanted to have a lineup with him, and then they got on the track to race, and they were terrible. That team just needs to hit the reset button.
Indeed, it did. Mark, was there anything from the truck race that caught your eye there?
So I didn't get to catch a whole lot of the truck race live. I did watch some of the recap and highlights, but for me, I think just in general, it seems like Corey Heim and Christian Eckes, these guys are going at it on like a weekly basis. So I've respected Heim as a driver here in the truck series. I feel like all year, I think you have to. He's been one of the fastest drivers. He's got one of the fastest cars. So I think he's got a good shot at the whole thing. So see.
So would you say that would make you place a little futures bet on Corey Heim to win the title now?
I'm down. Oh, yeah. I can get down with that.
And, his odds are probably better now than they were when we were pushing him, Sean, back at the middle of the year. Because Heim hasn't been nearly as dominant the last month as he was the first, say, 4 months of the season. You know what? I've got him here. I'll tell you what they are. Because I don't know what they were earlier in the year.
He's plus 150 to win the title, as well as Christian Eckes.
They're both 150 only?
Really?
Yep. According to
can't do it. Can't do it. Not after the way the last race finished last year. I can't do it.
Yeah, so Heim is plus 150. Eckes is plus 150 as well. Majeski's plus 250. And then from there, you start to get some deeper odds a little bit. Nick Sanchez is 9-1, and then you have Raja Caruth at 22-1, Taylor Gray at plus 3,000 there, or 30,000, I should say, as well as Enfinger, and then Tyler Ankrum is at plus 40K. So
I think it's just plus 4K, right?
Or 4K,
plus 4K, yeah.
So 4-1.
That's
40-1. 40-1.
It's not a bet to make, I feel like, but at the end of the day, there's a reason why the lines are so on some of these guys at the top here, because they've been dominant all season. So,
right, and that's
true.
That's the tricky thing with NASCAR is, at least in my opinion, I'll use Jimmy Johnson as an example. He would start off the year hot, and they would always get cold right about June, July, August, all summer, and then you would see him start to tick up, and then by the last 2 months of the season, they were again one of the toughest cars to beat race in, race out, right? It's so very cyclical. So it's almost like your best bet. If you want to make NASCAR future bets, in my opinion, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable, like Marcus suggested in DFS, and do it closer to mid-season. And you really want to keep in mind who you like 2 months prior. That's kind of how I would approach it anyway.
I think that's not a bad approach. Not a bad approach overall. And for those listening or watching, could make a note of that for future reference, especially when we go to the season next year, where it's going to be real interesting there with all the different roster changes.
Yes.
I was just going to say, I feel like futures and live betting are almost like the same thing. It's all about timing. They're the complete opposite type of bets when it comes to frequency and time, but it's all about the timing. It's just getting it well in advance, finding it at the right moment, buying the dips. That's what it's all about. So I feel like futures, you have to have a plan. You have to map it out in advance to actually take advantage, just in general, not just NASCAR.
Right. And you know what? I'm going to make a note for that, honestly, and take a look that maybe next year, Sean, around that June time period, July time period, we maybe isolate part of the show for, say, some futures, right? You know, noting, hey, we like these guys 3 months ago. They're struggling now. Now's a good time to actually make the bet, right? It's just as risky as it was then. It just our profit margin is better now, right? So, because look, in all fairness, the guys we've talked about, regardless of the series, the guys we've talked about early on till now, we're talking about the same guys. You know what I mean? William Byron's been very quiet. Like Kevin Harvick said on his podcast, he had him out. Well, Byron's the one that gets to advance. We'll get to that. But, you know, for the last, 2 months, Sean? 3 months? He's been pretty meh.
Very ice cold, only just having the occasional really good, great run here or there.
Right.
So that just goes to show. Speaking of truck series, let's get into the top and worst place differential plays of the week there. The top one, no shocker, Corey Heim, plus 32 positions, starting 33rd, finishing first. No shocker there. His teammate was the second highest place differential earner of the week in the truck series with 15 positions gained. Tanner Gray started 21st, finished in the 6th position. And then third on that list, Bailey Curry. He started 22nd, ended up finishing in the 8th position. A solid top 10 run for Bailey Curry over there.
So shout out to Kenobi on Tanner Gray. I was more on Taylor than I was Tanner. I especially love that Kenobi pointed out how he was doing in the ARCA race. I wish I had kind of pivoted more to Tanner. I was kind of pushing Bailey, but I want to make sure we give a shout out to Mr. Kenobi on that one.
Good stuff, Kenobi. Good stuff. He's been killing it with the lineups lately, too. So shout out to him. The worst place differential plays of the week for the trucks, Matt Mills losing 21 positions there. He started 12th, finishing 33rd after getting involved in a crash during the race. Not a good day for him. Ben Rhodes, as mentioned, he started 4th, finished 22nd over there. And then that's supposed to be Daniel Dye, not Tanner Gray.
Okay.
He started in the 10th position and finished 27th too. Yeah, he was eliminated from the playoffs after just a mediocre run. It's very unfortunate.
He got some damage too, didn't he get involved in a wreck?
Yeah, I believe so too. Stage winners. Stage 1 winner was Ty Majeski. Stage 2 winner, Corey Heim. Corey Heim also led the most laps at 64. Ty Majeski led 51. And then Christian Eckes, he led 19. The big three of trucks, as you can call it, they were the only drivers to lead laps in the truck race this week, guys.
Not shocked. At these bigger tracks, Sean, I think this is probably what we're going to see.
Yes.
Actually, at the smaller tracks, probably too. I don't know that we're going to see 6, 7, 8 leaders.
Yeah, certainly, especially if these three are just leading the charge with how fast their trucks have been since the playoffs began.
Buy the dip on Majeski. Buy the dip, man.
Buy the dip on Majeski. Mark has
and
a
DFS.
Brilliant call there. Yep.
All right, so we have our whole list of other finishers there too. Is there any other drivers that stand out to you within this large list that we have here?
Caden Honeycutt, 4th. I pushed him hard. He ran well here last year, so shout out to him. They needed that as a bounce back. Connor Mozak had a nice 10th place run. Chase Purdy, I think they were looking for a little bit better, but honestly, finishing 11th's not bad. Nick Sanchez was in the top 5 for most of the day, so that one kind of hurt there, finishing 12th. Bummer that Majeski ran out of gas to finish 15th because he really was going to be tough. I was a little bummed out about Butterbean Queen's finish, but he'll be all right.
It's Nathan Bird.
Yeah,
Nathan
shout
Bird.
out to Nathan Bird.
Good call
He's
there.
in that Young's Motorsports there truck. He started from the 32nd position, finished 19th. Solid place differential run for him.
Good call out on Bird there, Mark. Yeah, he they were talking about him in the booth quite a bit, so I got to do some research on Mr. Nathan Bird.
Disappointing days for Corey Day there in the 32nd position and Marco Andretti as well. Lawless Allen, I know there was some action on him in the Discord there for the truck series. That was unfortunate too.
Poor Kenobi. Mark, you probably don't know the history on me and Lawless Allen. He's always showing speed, but every time I go to use him, he crashes. And when I say, hey, we can't trust him because he crashes, he ends up having a top 15 finish. So I basically don't mention him at all and kind of will highlight him in cheat sheets or things like that because I don't want to jinx him. So when Kenobi's like, I'm using him, I'm like, I can't, bro. And then I felt bad because he ended up getting damaged and finishing near the back.
Yeah, just unfortunate. But, that's how it is with the Truck Series. Some days you just get really fortunate. Some days you just really don't. And that goes to show with all these finishers here, because we had a mix of fortunate finishers and unfortunate finishers.
I just wanted to say also, how can we bet against Frankie Muniz? Like, just any time we see him in a race, can we just find a way to bet against him at this point?
I don't know of a way, Mark. That is a good call out. Like, I haven't found first driver wrecks out, or, drivers with least amount of laps finished. I haven't found any books that have stuff like that yet.
They don't do head-to-heads in trucks, or they don't post any kind of head-to-heads either.
No, not in trucks. Nope, that's a good call out too. No, honestly, Mark, we get kind of shafted when it comes to betting the trucks, which I feel bad about. I don't feel bad. I feel frustrated because I would love to bet on it more, but there's times we don't have lines. More than once this year, they pulled lines during practice and qualifying, which makes sense, and never put them back up before the race.
Yeah. That really sucks, though.
It does. It's frustrating.
Just going to say, credit where credit is due, Frankie Muniz did actually score positive place differential this weekend. So credit where credit is due. He at least moved up a few spots.
They should post a line on that. Positive or negative place differential.
You know what? That's not a bad idea either. He did run okay in ARCA. In his limited time in ARCA, he wasn't trash, but that doesn't really mean much.
Considering that he was in a Ford ARCA car when that series is dominated by Venturini Toyotas, and he even had the point series lead at one point, credit where credit is due. That's at least something.
That's what I'm saying. I have had higher hopes for him. I don't really like the teams he's signed on with, but I tell you what, Mark, you bring up a point here. There are plenty drivers that I like that you will never see me bet on because I don't trust the equipment.
Yeah. Equipment is a very, very big thing, especially pretty much you could say in truck and Xfinity, that especially matters very much more so than Cup. Cup is a little bit more equal, but there are still some tracks where, say, and I think this weekend is one of those tracks in mind where one manufacturer might be a little bit better than the others. So,
which they're changing next year with the new nose and all of that. But you're spot on, Sean. The parity in Cup is far different than trucks or Xfinity. And you guys tell me another sport where the equipment means as much as racing, right? I mean, at the very least, it's a 50-50 thing, right? 50% driver, 50% car.
Yeah, very much so. All right, guys, let's get into
we could cheer for football helmets exploding or something, but
that would be pretty fun as well. Not gonna lie. You know what else was also fun was the Xfinity Series race there. Eric Almirola, he played Xfinity playoff spoiler as he prevailed over Cole Custer and Chandler Smith for the win. Very, very impressive drive for Eric Almirola. He went up there and took that late, basically over those two drivers as they were fighting it out. Whoop, just walked on by.
How many races is he going to win to finish the Xfinity Series season, since he's in that car the rest of the year?
Well, this was his second win of the year. I could see him leaving with at least one more.
I won't be shocked if he gets two.
Certainly in the realm of possibility right there. Joe Gibbs Racing, they occupied 3 of the top 5 spots, just like last week's race at Bristol. So this time it was Eric Almirola winning. Chandler Smith, as mentioned, he was in the 3rd position. And then Sheldon Creed with yet another top 5 finish. He finished in 5th. The last JGR driver in the race was Taylor Gray. And unfortunately for him, he had engine problems on lap 45 that ended his day right there.
Taylor Gray is having he's having such a bad run, Mark. And the thing is, mark my words, that guy is going to be on fire to start next year. Mark my words. He's with Gibbs. He's going to be in good equipment, whether it's Xfinity or trucks. I got to even go look, but he's going to be fine. How did Sheldon Creed not get second? That's what I want to know.
He just did not have the car to keep up with Custer, Smith, and Almirola.
I mean, my Lord, he's been Mr. Second Place. I feel bad. Now he's 5th, but And you know what? Take note, Chandler Smith's in the hunt for the championship. I know Allgaier's up there and people are really on him, but do not sleep on Chandler Smith for this championship.
Especially on shorter tracks where he's been really good. If he makes it to Phoenix, I say watch out.
Yep, I'm in complete agreement.
So speaking of drivers that are in the hunt, well, I guess you could say drivers were hunting each other after this race because we had a couple of different incidents where there were some angry drivers. So we had Cole Custer going against Chandler Smith. Now, Custer thought Smith put him in the fence late. Custer directly confronted Chandler after the race and said, "You're basically going to get it." And then Riley Herbst and Austin Hill, after Austin Hill spun Riley earlier on in the race, they had a conversation after the race as well. And then Sammy Smith versus AJ Allmendinger, after the two made contact earlier in the race, which basically kind of killed the performance of Smith's car and didn't really help Allmendinger that much either. Should we be on the lookout for some potential rivalries or payback in the upcoming races between these drivers, especially as it's coming down to playoff crunch time here? These are all playoff drivers. Let's not forget.
Herbst and Hill, I can see.
Yeah. No, I mean, Hill stands out to me as a guy that's been picking some fights. Allmendinger, too, he's been fiery. I feel like over the last month and a half or so, this guy there's been something going on with him every single week.
Part of Dinger's problem is they finally showed speed again. He dominated this series 2 years ago. Like, just dominated. He didn't win did he win the championship that year? I don't think he did.
No, he fell short.
Yeah, but he dominated. Like, the first 3 quarters of the year was just his. Like, he won every road race. He was winning everywhere. Moved up the Cup. They finally got speed back, and I think what you're seeing there with Dinger is it's just kind of like Kyle. Now that the speed's back, he's pressing a little bit. He's trying to get those wins. He's trying to get the car up front. So I think that's what you're seeing. I would be shocked if Sammy Smith and Allmendinger don't put this to rest. Dinger's a very popular guy in the garage overall. He's known to be kind of a wise guy, funny, full of life, full of energy. So I don't see that going anywhere. But you hit the nail on the head with Hill, in my opinion, Mark. He's already been warned by NASCAR to tone it down. After who was it that he wrecked? Was it Creed or was it Custer? It's Custer, I think.
Yeah, it was Custer not too long ago. And then
it was like a month ago.
This week he had a conversation with Riley Herbst after Riley went ahead and talked to him. Now, Austin, to his credit, he did actually go up to him and he said he was sorry for it and apologized though for that.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought it looked awfully animated to me, so I wasn't 100% sure. The one I don't want to see is Custer Smith be a thing, at least wrecking cars, because you know what? That's what ruined Corey Haim's run last year, was him and Hocevar deciding they wanted to have some sort of dick measuring contest in the middle of the race.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think out of the three, if you were to ask me, I think that's the one most likely that could escalate into something more.
Well, they're neck and neck, right? I mean, we both believe that the top four is probably going to have those two guys in it. I'm not sure where Mark falls on that coin. I'm sure he's probably somewhere in the ballpark. But I know we've talked about that we fully expect two of those guys to be there at the final four. So,
oh, for sure. Mark, what do you think? You think Custer versus Smith? You think that's going to escalate into more harder-edged racing?
For me, I think Sammy Smith is the scary driver. I don't want any part of this dude. I don't know what it is for me, but I think Sammy Smith is like, I don't know how many DNFs does he have? Because it seems like to me every other race he's wrecking or spinning out or something.
I'll look that up.
I feel like I've had multiple lineups this year where he's been in it and he's just completely ruined my day and I turned it off with like 30 laps to go type of thing. So, but I feel like Custer, man, I don't know. Custer doesn't seem like he's gonna be. Custer's all business to me. That's what it seems like, and he's going after those consistent top finishes. So it just doesn't seem like that's the guy that's going to be targeting someone like Chandler Smith.
Sammy Smith has 2 races where he didn't finish. Austin, Texas, the road race, and
Coda.
He hasn't finished on the lead lap, though. He's actually done pretty well in finishing on the lead lap. What it is, Mark, and I know the pain you're feeling because I've used Smith and pushed him in places. He's had horrible finishes with lots of place differential points being taken away. Because honestly, I'm only seeing 5 races where he didn't finish on the lead lap, 6 races.
Well, it's probably I've rostered him on every single one of those races. That's probably what happened.
It very well could be. Like I said, because I'm looking here at the start finish, in the chart here, and there's quite a few races where, right here, he finished 1 lap down, but he started 23rd. I guarantee you we thought that was a good play. He finished 34th. Talladega started 5th, finished 21st. Sonoma started 10th, finished 33rd. Again, he was still, running at that point. He was 8 laps down that race. All right, this race, only 1 lap down. Nashville started 12th, finished 30th. Like, there's a lot of that. And the sad thing is, Mark, is last year, if you would have asked me, I would have said Sammy Smith was one of the guys to watch for the 2024 season. He has been, I don't know how you feel, Sean. He's been a letdown to me.
He's been a very boomer bust driver because he has a few weeks, you could say, where he ends up really paying off, and he's got the solid equipment to boot because he's with JRM. But then there's just been weeks where either he gets involved in accidents, has some sort of trouble, or just simply he just does not agree with the car and track combination. It just leads to an underwhelming result. He's been very much boomer bust, which, I mean, the boom weeks have been enough in order to even get him into the playoffs this year. But the bust weeks are probably going to be what keeps him out of the playoffs and makes him not get the championship. I mean, he was the last guy in on points this year. So, to your credit, Rich, you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's true. But I can't lie. He's been a bit of a disappointment, though, man. I mean, I don't know that he deserves in the playoffs, to be honest with you. It's kind of how I feel. Like, and maybe I'm just being harder on him because I had such high expectations. But look, we have seen multiple drivers go to JRM from other programs, and we've had high hopes for them because JRM is good equipment. And for whatever reason, it always seems to take a year. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a communication thing with crew chiefs. I don't know if it's, they focus on things and ease them in. I don't know what it is, but we have not really seen anyone jump to JRM and fly, like we have with JGR. So, I don't know.
Not since I'd argue maybe Tyler Reddick or William Byron when they hopped in those cars.
Fair. And maybe that's the problem is I'm having that expectation for those guys. And it's probably not fair because as we see at the Cup level, Byron and Reddick are kind of a tier above a lot of the guys in the Cup Series. So are we shocked to see them dominate? Just like the smart-ass comment I made about Eric Amarola. I'm being dead serious. It's JGR equipment. He has a ton of Cup experience. He wasn't the most extravagant or best Cup driver, but he has Cup wins. He has top 10 finishes, top 5 finishes, and he's in the best equipment in the Xfinity Series. Don't sleep on this guy.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about Sammy Smith I wanted to bring up too. We have to remember, last year he was in JGR equipment, which at times you can argue is better and more consistent than JRM equipment.
It's true. So, it's true.
That's something
let's
have to keep in mind there. Yeah.
Well, I suppose you want to highlight the place differentials. I was going to say, let's get into the Cup Series because I want to talk Cup, but there are some place differentials here that are worth mentioning. Shane Van Gisbergen. Sean, is there any week we should not use him in Xfinity or Mark? What are your guys' thoughts? Because it seems like all this guy does is qualify and finish in the top 15.
I mean, SVG, maybe if there was a week where I might be a little bit more wary about using him, maybe this week could potentially be one of those weeks because on the super speedways, he's been a little bit more mixed compared to the other track types. But on the ovals and even on the road courses, of course, I think you've got to use him.
I mean, his 100%. Pricing hasn't been bad. Yeah.
No, his pricing's all over the place, depending on the course, though, too. I feel like at least DFS, they can't really figure that out yet with the different types of or different types of course types. But I've been on SVG since they announced them full time in the Cup Series going into next year, and I feel like we're starting to see, at least for me so far, in following NASCAR in general, the positive news, like the upward trends, that oftentimes does result in future races where these guys are driving well. It just seems like when there's good vibes going, they tend to produce better because there's distractions. They know what their future looks like. They know that they're going to be in the same place with the same crew and the same team. So there's a lot of continuity across the board. So To me, SVG is definitely a guy you have to target each and every week.
Well, and his pricing is going to be abnormal because at the road courses, he's going to be the highest priced.
Yeah.
And at super speedways and some of the ovals where he doesn't have experience, that's where the books and DK and all of them are kind of off. But I think you hit on something very important there, Mark. Brett Griffin, the spotter, they do that door bumper clear show. He was talking about, you can go back in history in NASCAR. When someone loses a ride, one of two things happens and nothing in between. They either rise to the top and drive their butts off, and you are shocked at the types of finishes they come up with, or they basically crash and burn and disappear into nowhere land. And there's really not much in between. And we've talked about it before. Someone got a new contract. Someone signed a multi-year deal. That's in football, I almost get cringy because it's like once they get paid, I worried they're not going to play now. Whereas, we love to use them, but while they're fighting for contracts. With NASCAR, I'm with you, Mark. They got married. They had a kid. They got a new contract. It's like good mojo. They just feed off of it.
True. Very true. Let's continue with the rest of the list here real quick. Leland Honeyman, he gained 13 positions impressively, starting last and finishing 25th. Then 4 drivers ended up gaining 10 positions in the Xfinity race. Sheldon Creed started 15th, finished 5th. Matt DiBenedetto started 24th, finished 14th. Brennan Poole started 28th and finished 18th. Ryan Ellis started 29th and finished 19th. And I'm just going to quickly get into the worst plays of the week for Xfinity. Justin Allgaier, he started 9th, finished 36th. And then Taylor Gray, as mentioned, he started 11th, finished 38th due to that engine issue. Corey Heim was not as fortunate in Xfinity as he was in trucks. He lost 14 positions by starting 17th and finishing 31st. Sammy Smith, as mentioned, he lost 9 positions, started 13th, finished 22nd there.
Yeah, Allgaier with obviously the big drop there, but also I think for me, I was on guys like Creed, Jones, Austin Hill, but I got totally burned by Taylor Gray, man. So it was unfortunate. I had him in my core. It sucks that he ended up having some engine issues and everything else, but I got to pay attention to that stuff more, right? I mean, it just we talk about trends, and he was in a downward trend, and that's like we said just now. That stuff matters.
Yeah. And what's funny is to the thing though, Mark, engine issues or not, it's one of those. I'd rather be early on the trend back up, like someone like William Byron. It's coming back around. I'm confident in it. Same thing with Taylor Gray. Trust me, it's going to come back around. I don't know if he's doing too much, pressing too much. He's run some ARCA, he's run some trucks, he's run some Xfinity. The poor dude could just be wore out at this time of the year. At least I would be. Granted, I'm not 20, whatever he is. But engine stuff, dude, at this level, that's not common. That's stuff that you're not going to see. That's one of those where dude gets a high ankle sprain in the first quarter. What do you do? You know what I mean? Like it's a kick in the nuts. But from a advisory standpoint, if they knew they had anything going on with that motor, they would have changed the motor and he would have started from the rear,
Yeah.
So.
Truly. You know what? Let's skip all the way to the Cup Series race now. So who would have thought that the race would turn out for Cup to be as dramatic as it did? Ross Chastain, he held on. He wins over William Byron and Martin Truex Jr. Joe Gibbs Racing and Hendrick Motorsports, they came to play this week as they occupied 7 of the top 10 positions there, guys. How about that?
And the guy that was best for him normally did nothing but struggle all day.
Well, I'd want to say that as far as if you're referring to Kyle Larson there, he got involved with that blown tire early, and then just the car was never the same from there.
No, and Harvick was talking about it. They said it wasn't even a real blown tire. Like it went flat. And because when they got it off the car, they didn't think they even had a Goodyear tech down there. They didn't think it was flat, not until one of the crew members put all their weight on it. And then it was clear the tire was flat. But of course, like you said, because of the diffuser and everything, they did end up with some damage though, which was weird. Like, the whole thing with Kyle Larson this weekend was just odd. I'm just saying it's weird that the team did so well, and yet the leader of the crew, the leader of the pack, is the one that didn't do so well.
Yeah, especially you even want to go back and talk about Ross Chastain there. If you thought about Ross Chastain during practice, he did not look good throughout practice. I mean, even on the longer runs, his car was just not as fast as a lot of the other drivers.
It's a good thing I trust you both then, because I did not see that, because I don't watch NASCAR. I don't have NBC app. I can't get the stupid thing to work. So I trusted you guys. I didn't realize that. And that, I don't want to say that's alarming, but I mean, again, Sean, we've talked about this a few times. And Mark, I'd love to get your opinion on this. I'm kind of at the point now, qualifying means more to me than practice. Like, I am worried I've put too much. For years, the top 10 or the 10-lap average was gold, man. Didn't matter where they started. If you use that, it was going to put you in the right direction. I've been burned by that more than a few times this year. And when I've looked at those times, I've been like, man, what happened? Because so-and-so didn't look great in practice, but, they were a 10th place qualifier,
He was a 20th place qualifier, Ross Chastain, this week.
Yeah, I definitely, if it wasn't for you guys talking him up, I would have ran and hit. So props to you guys.
Yeah, and it's just because he had good track history. That was my main reason for pushing him anyway. The track history was promising enough for Ross, and then he ended up paying off, especially as they worked on the car all throughout the race. They got that car better, and then he got the track position to the point where he just couldn't be passed. Well, Kyle Busch made a pass on him, but then that worked out.
Kyle Busch, that was some of the – I don't know if you saw that, Mark. That's the type of racing that gets my pants to fit tight. Like, that is the stuff that I live for at the track or would tune into racing for that I feel like we don't get much these days. That was fun to watch, man.
You're talking about squeezing between the wall, right?
No,
when he was trying to go around the leader.
I'm talking about, well, not the wreck he had, but running down the leader and then the jockeying they were doing on the inside, right? Like Kyle went around him, and then Ross kept trying to cut that angle, kept cutting that angle. And what did Kyle do? He just kept running that high line, carrying momentum, right? And so you didn't know if he messed up or off, one's going to get in front of the other. And we had kind of that battle back and forth. It was a process to get by the lead car, but it was possible. This aero blocking didn't come into play like we've seen almost everywhere else all year, which is very unfortunate. What we saw there in the last, 40 laps, 30 laps when that was going on, man, that's the stuff that gets exciting because it didn't end up working out. But if you're a Chastain or Busch fan, for example, or even the guys in third or fourth, you knew there's some excitement here. Kyle's got the lead, and then all shit hits the fan, whatever, and, we're back to square one. But that is the type of stuff that turned me into a fan of racing way back when. I lived for that. I just wish we got it more.
It's exhilarating, man. There's nothing like watching a close race like that where it comes down and like you said, you're within laps of a long race, and these guys are going at it, and we're talking inches at like 200 miles per hour. So it's wild. It's maniacal, quite frankly.
Right? We got to get you to a couple more races, Mark. We got
to.
We got to.
Oh yeah.
We got to. We'll figure it out. Sorry, Sean. I was so excited watching that, and I think that's why I got so frustrated. I want to see Kyle continue the streak. I love what Chase Briscoe said in the interview. Hat tip to him. Kyle Busch fans that are going after Briscoe, EAD. That's uncalled for. There's no need for it. I thought Briscoe was honest, fair. He did what he was supposed to do. Kyle took responsibility. Kyle's pushing. Kyle wants this win more than anything else, and we saw this with Jimmy Johnson when he turned Martin Truex at the Roval. He was so close to winning those years ago, and he just drove over his head to get there, and Kyle's doing the same thing now. And it sucks because I'm afraid he's not going to get that win. I want to see it, and I did. That's when I saw what was happening. They came out after the pit stop. Chastain took off, and that was all she wrote. Truex and the group behind him, they had nothing for him.
Yeah, that's true. Just going to get back to the finishers here real quick. Ross Chastain, he was one of the only three finishers inside the top 10 that weren't from Gibbs or Hendrick, as well as Ryan Blaney, who finished in the fourth position. And then the last one on that list, Zane Smith. How about that?
Hey, who was pushing Zane Smith? Sean.
There you go. I mean, Zane's coming alive in the second half of this year.
You talked me into it on the podcast, so guess who used Zane Smith in a bunch of lineups?
He ended up getting a top 10 out of the deal, even after he qualified relatively high for his price. I mean, he ended up getting place differential, finishing 10th. Telling you, if he ends up going towards front row next year, I mean, that could be very interesting.
Mark, that's a perfect example. Remember when I said earlier that he says either if you lose your ride or you feel like you either rise or you're crash and burn? There is no certainty with Zane Smith, right? There's no certainty if he's in Cup next year. And what is homeboy doing? He's trying to make a statement of why he needs to be in Cup.
And there you go. That would talk about it from a DFS perspective. Go after an uncertain type of driver who has high upside, who could crash and burn, but you're going after all the money, man. So, hey, I just wanted to make one other point too about, you mentioned qualifying, right? And kind of, looking at that, how much that goes into process. For me, I like to take a snippet of, I'll literally just take a screenshot of what the sportsbooks odds are right around this time. I'll literally just screenshot it, store it away, and then I'll pull it again after qualifying happens as well, and compare and contrast and see, okay, hey, these guys qualified well, other guys didn't. What are the discrepancies between these two screens? Okay, there are multiple scenarios where there are completely different odds that changed on a few of these drivers. Did it change because of qualifying? Did it change because of something else? And then dive into it from there, and then try to figure out ownership.
Oh, that's
good call.
Brilliant, Mark. Now let me ask you this. How do you go about figuring out ownership? I suck at that, bro. Like, I mean, terrible. Flat terrible. I have decent guesses sometimes, but that's it.
I think ownership from a NASCAR standpoint, it's based heavily off of prior performance. So a lot of people in the industry, they like to go after, hey, what did this guy do? And including ourselves. And it's not always wrong, but you just have to understand that, the guys that have the best track record, that have typically the best history at that track, are normally going to garner higher ownership. And then if you add in qualifying and they qualify high, or are a overpriced driver, or are a priced up driver who should do well and then starts at the back because of an engine thing and is going to give us a bunch of place differential, like, yes, that's going to command a lot more ownership. Not all chalky plays are bad, right? Some of the chalk you just have to eat and then get different other places. But that is where you look at those one-off scenarios and try to figure out who you're going after and which chalk you're fading. And that's why we're here in the Discord. That's why we're doing this. So,
well, and that's the area I want to expand as far as my repertoire goes the most, is the ownership aspect of it. Because I've come to the conclusion for NASCAR, you almost want to be chalky on 3/4 of your lineup. You really do. You can get away with being chalky on 5/6 of your lineup, honestly. Because what happens is, let's say Heim, he had to be close to 70-some% ownership. If he does crash, it has no impact on where you are in the standings because everybody's got him. At 79% or 76% where he was at, that was very minimal damage if something were to happen.
Yeah.
If he wins, like he did win, you have no shot. You literally have no prayer of cashing at all. No matter what you did with the rest of your lineup, you could build an amazing lineup. But if you didn't have the guy that started 33rd, that was 79% ownership share and won the race after leading the most laps, you didn't have a prayer. And so I have been adamant about take the chalk. And I've tried to use what you guys talk about in football, good chalk, bad chalk. Corey Heim was good chalk. He was not bad chalk. Let's say Brandon Jones was 50% ownership because he started second. I would argue that's bad chalk.
I do want to also bring up a example from this past weekend. Chase Elliott. He was the perfect example of good chalk because he started in the very last position, ended up finishing 9th right there.
Perfect. Justin Allgaier from Xfinity. Yes. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, I saw Justin Allgaier in that race in Xfinity a couple weeks ago where he went from I think it was first to 30th or something like that. And he was 88%, right? And it's like I was in a 24-person tournament. I had Justin Allgaier in my lineup. He was in 30th place, and I was in first. So it's everyone had him. So it's free square, basically.
Right. But if you hit on that 0.9 ownership person, the one person in your lineup that's only 0.9 or 1.9, and they hit, say they're a top 5 score, you almost, if you're chalky with the rest of your lineup or semi-chalky, you're pretty much set to cash in some way, shape, or form because you're with everybody on the main guy, but you have the one guy that nobody else does that was scoring in the top 5 or 10. And that's where I think NASCAR, you and I talked at the Expo, and I've talked about this with Sean. I've had to change my approach. in NASCAR, I've always been proud about predicting who's going to be fast and finishing well. That only goes so far in DFS. You have to, in fantasy football weekly, we don't want to chase points, right? NASCAR, we have to chase points. And what I mean by that is the place differential, the dominators, that we have to figure out, okay, I like these guys, but where am I going to maximize my points? Yeah. Or where do I minimize my losses to the competition on points? Good chalk, bad chalk, right? So that's the type of stuff that I feel like I need personally. I need to do more of, better of, and I'm really leaning on you a little bit, Mark, in your process, because you've done this so well for so long in other sports that I'm trying to kind of take from you some of those things to do. Like, I feel like I have a good idea who's heavy chalk, who's contrarian. I couldn't give you percentages if my life depended on it.
Well, and I'll close it out with this thought, but for me, one trend that I've noticed is, football, I typically like to go after chalky cheap plays or chalky value plays and then get different on the high end. And in NASCAR, it's the opposite for me. I'll go after the chalky higher price drivers and then try to get different towards the bottom and the mid tier. So it's almost like a completely opposite approach from football.
Maybe that's
and I'm just going to say this is going to be a very, very fun week in order to do that exact approach right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and see, this week we will be the chalk and the lower dollar values might fly just because we have learned by now, like Sean and I have said, and Mark, you and I talked about it. At these tracks, the money doesn't matter. When you go to Daytona and Talladega, the money for the drivers doesn't matter. What matters is place differential. Place differential is all that matters this weekend. I mean, I don't want to say we don't care where they finish, but in all intents and purposes, it's all about place differential.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Let's get right into the track preview then, and let's go straight to that and get more in depth about that there. So place differential is totally everything when it comes to Talladega. This is a sort of track where usually we try to push dominators most weeks. Well, here you can get multiple drivers leading laps at this very track. So, yeah.
We could easily have 40 different leaders. I don't mean 40 different drivers. I'm saying 40, 50 different leaders throughout the race. It won't be shocking if, the same car leads 3 or 4 times. But in fact, I tell you what, go on with your next thought, Sean. I'm going to pull up the last Talladega race and tell you how many different lap leaders we had.
Yeah, so overall, when it comes towards this race, you might get a few different drivers that end up leading a couple of laps there. We've seen that within the past couple of races, like, say, a Michael McDowell or like a Ryan Blaney or a Joey Logano type. Notice that all these drivers are Fords, and that's something you may want to remember for later as we get into our picks. But these sorts of drivers, they might lead for a period of time, but then if somebody gets past them, if the draft on a lane they just can't block in time just goes through, then you might start to see a whole bit of a shuffle between different leaders that maybe lead laps for, like, say, 5 to 10 laps at a time, and then a good amount of the field ends up leading laps that way. And if every driver is leading laps and there's not one clear dominator, that's where the place differential comes in, and that's why it is so very important this week if you're playing DFS.
You will not believe how many different lap leaders we had at the last Talladega race, Sean.
How many?
Almost half the field. I'm still counting. It's easier to count how many people didn't lead laps than how many people led laps. I'm not joking. The most laps led was 36. That was Michael McDowell, followed by Logano with 22 and John Hunter Nemechek with 20. And we had two guys at 16. I won it. Exactly. When you're only getting 0.25 points, Mark, that's nothing, right? Meanwhile, we only had 15 drivers that didn't lead a lap. 15. 2 of which were cars we probably thought would at some point, Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell. But that's it. So out of 38 drivers, 23 drivers at least led 1 lap in the last Talladega race.
But how many drivers will finish on the lead lap? I'm seeing lines at about 29.5, and that's what we have to be careful about with place differential, is not getting anyone that's stuck. But however, keep this in mind. We're talking about cautions. We could talk about a wreck that takes out 5 or 6 drivers. So it's probably a lot. It's probably pretty easy to get back on the lead lap too.
So here's the deal, Mark. I think this is going to shock you. Guess how many cars finished a lap down or more?
The past race, you're saying?
Yep, the last Talladega race.
9.
8. You were close. We had 2 cars, 1 lap down. One crashed on the last lap, Michael McDowell, the guy that led the most laps. Spoiler alert. We had 2 cars that finished 4 laps down, still running. John Hunter Nemechek, guy who was in the top 3 in laps led, and Justin Haley. And we had 4 cars that basically, 3 cars that were basically involved in one wreck on lap 154. Eric Jones, Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin, and Christopher Bell crashed all by himself early on at lap 132. But for the most part, 30th place and above finished on the lead lap. And to your point, you can go ahead.
Oh no, I was just looking on. I'm looking on Prize Picks right now. I'm not seeing it, but I'm looking for a laps led prop to see if I can take the under on it. But they don't have anything, so not yet.
Oh, but I like your logic there. I'm digging that logic, man. See, we got Mark needs to be a staple on here, man. There's way too much we're missing out on savvy little moves that are going to make us money. Oh, I dig it. No, and you're right though. With a track like that, and since the pack is the way it is, Mark, you could easily go 2 laps down at the beginning of the race. Say they had some stupid penalty where they had to do a drive-through penalty that we've seen in the past, okay? And they end up all by themselves, a lap. They get lapped again. They're 2 laps down. That next caution that comes out at the stage break, they got 1 lap back. We got a wreck that just took place, got that lap back. Now they're at the back of the pack. Now we got a big crash. Oh, crap. Now all of a sudden they're in 5th place. Like, I mean, that happens, right? We've seen it.
We saw it earlier this year with Kyle Larson at one of the Superspeedway races.
So these things do happen. But, Mark, I love the way you're thinking, man. I'm sorry. I forgot to put the disclaimer out there. This show is with Richard Maletto, so please make sure no children are listening, or if you have sensitive ears or opinions that you do not listen, because he's a jerk. But besides that,
you should have done that at the beginning of the show, but I guess better late than never.
Yeah, right. So interesting. That I can't lie. I would have thought there'd been more because of the big one. I really would have thought there would have been, say, 15 cars that didn't finish on the lead lap simply because they didn't finish the race. So now Daytona had more wrecks. Atlanta didn't. Dega's a little wider. It's the playoffs, Sean. Do we see them tone it down a little bit? I mean, the non-playoff guys?
No.
They don't care.
No, totally not.
They're going out to win.
And for the playoff drivers, some of them have this race circled down that they're going to try to win it too. I mean, especially if you know you're not going to be good at the Charlotte Roval, which closes out the round, you have this race circled.
You need something here.
Exactly. So that just goes to show that's something that we have to keep in mind. Just the playoff conditions are at play. Now let's get into the notable and part-time starters for all 3 series this week. Trucks has the largest list here. William Sawalich in the number 1 for Tricon Garage. Keith McGee in the number 02 for Young's Motorsports, which just got a 19th place finish with Nathan Bird. Keep that in mind. Corey Roper in the 04. Norm Benning in the 6. Connor Zilich in the 7 for Spire Motorsports. Johnny Sauter is back with Hattori in the number 16. Mason Maggio is in the 21. Jason M. White in the 22. Brian Dawzat in the number 28. Danny Bond is in the number 44 for Nice. Caden Honeycutt is also with Nice again this week in the 45. Stephen Parsons is back in the number 75 this week. That should be interesting right there. And here's a name we haven't heard of it for a while if you've watched the Xfinity Series before. Ryan Reed, former Xfinity Series winner at Daytona, is making a NASCAR return in the number 91 truck. So very interesting to note right there. And Clay Greenfield is in the number 95.
Good stuff. Good stuff. For Xfinity, we got CJ McLaughlin, who he always seems to come and go. David Starr is back. He's got to be the oldest one in the field, guys. I'm pretty confident of that, actually. Dylan Lupton, who there's been a lot of hype surrounding him. Taylor Gray's back. Eric Almirola is back. Eric Almirola will be driving that 20 car the rest of the year. Dean Thompson driving for Sam Hunt. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. Dean Thompson has shown speed at times, and I don't know what to do there. Jordan Anderson will be back in the 32 car. Joey Gase in the 35. Watch out for Jordan Anderson. They tend to run well at these big tracks. Cesar Barcella in the 45. Carson Ware in the 53. Is that Rick Ware's son?
I have not looked up to see if they're related or not.
Or Cody Ware's son, maybe? Maybe it's Cody Ware's son. Carson Guapo, who will be in the 88, who has that ride for next year. And Nick Letts. Nick Letts, I feel like, has shown up a time or two. So I'll have to go do some digging on him.
Yes. And for the Cup Series roster, we have AJ Allmendinger in a third Kaulig Racing entry, the number 13. Cody Ware is back in a number 15 for Rick Ware Racing. Shane Van Gisbergen is pulling double duty, driving the number 16 car for Kaulig Racing and Cup. JJ Yaley's in the number 44. And then this is the one I'm excited about personally. Anthony Alfredo in the 62 for Beard Motorsports. Oh, I have a lot of really positive feelings about that one there. And then BJ McLeod is in the 78. So
that 62 truck has run well with Brendan Gaughan at these tracks. They do not show up at all places. And say what you want, Anthony Alfredo has looked good when he's been in a Cup Super Speedway run or an Xfinity Super Speedway run. He has consistently ran in like the top 5, top 10 during the races. Like every time we go to a Super Speedway, you hear his name mentioned, and that 62 car, they can do it. So I'm feeling it, Sean. I'm with you.
He just finished 6th too back in earlier this year in the spring.
That's right. He did.
Yeah,
good call
very
out, Mark.
Very exciting times there with Anthony Alfredo. Now, before we get into our final picks there for this week, the final early picks, I should say, be sure to go over to fantasyguru.com. As mentioned at the top of the show, you can get MVP Platinum or any of the all-in packages. You can also get the buy one, get one free offer for any of the DFS or betting packages. We got basketball season that's just starting up here, so if you want to get in on the basketball action, you should do that as well. And as well for NFL, while we're in the midst of the season there's still plenty of weeks to go with that, so get in there, get the package, hit support at fantasyguru.com for the best possible deal you can get. So there you go. And
Fincy's got basketball going. He's got basketball in the brain, man. He's all fired up. He's ready to go. He's got goals. He's got targets. Don't miss out on Fincy's basketball stuff. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you've even gotten involved in some of the basketball betting and DFS a little bit, have you, Mark? Too, right?
Oh yeah, NBA did pretty well last year. I think it was my 3rd most profitable sport. But hey, NHL too. The NHL team crushes. You guys. Oh man, if you haven't followed the NHL guys, they put out some dime articles. I've made some nice money. I made some nice money last year, and that was my first year dabbling. So it's kind of following suit with when I started following you guys with NASCAR. And man, winter sports are a lot of fun.
Jorge Pucks in that group over there last year, I think it's last 2 years, they have started out the season like red hot. Like, I mean, you made all your money back you spent in the first month. Like, they were killing it. So yes, good shot out there, Mark. Hat tip to look. I understand we're biased here, but I stand by all the content on the site. I think Jeff and Rob do a phenomenal job of getting the right talent. So, you're right there with them, Mark. I mean, you're a heck of a DFS player, and it shows. You do it in other sports where you say you don't have all that much knowledge. I don't do that well in sports. I feel like I have the knowledge. So, there's something to be said about how you play the game and the skill set that goes with it. So hat tip to you. Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is, at least once I started writing for the site, I also got to see how much work everyone puts into the content that we're putting out there and how much research that we all do and the time and the energy and the effort that you put in. So to me, it gives me more confidence and it's paying dividends, right? I'm like, hey, I know these guys are hustling to get some of this information. I'm throwing more money on it than I used to, and I'm making more money, so it's great, man.
There you go. Awesome. But that's what we do here at Fantasy Guru. We print money. We help you get better at printing money. So
let's
help the people.
Well, should we talk about our favorite drivers for the week?
But yeah, that's how I was going to say.
Absolutely.
That's how we help people print money. Let's get our early picks out there for Talladega, even though I'm sure qualifying is going to mainly change a lot of this later.
Yeah.
Top price picks to watch. Now, we usually always play the game of how much do we overlap? Well, we're all kind of a little mixed up there. We're all on some of the same guys. We're on some different guys this week. For me, with the top priced options, I have Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, and William Byron as my three. I just really like all three of these drivers. William Byron especially has been one of the more consistent drivers at the super speedways at Daytona and Talladega, as he has about maybe 5 top 10s in the last 6 races at those 2 tracks combined. Ryan Blaney, Team Penske, they always bring the speed at this track type there, and you have to put them on your radar. Any of the Penske drivers, I think, are worthy to mention this week. And then Brad Keselowski, he's led laps in a lot of the Daytona and Talladega races dating back to about the start of the next-gen car. It's hard to think of a race where he hasn't led a lap at either Daytona or Talladega since 2022, so he's going to be a factor this week, too.
I'm in total agreement with all those. Looks like Mark's got a little overlap with you. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I went Team Penske as well. I mean, look, like you said, it's gonna come down to ownership. It's gonna come down to qualifying. So, but Blaney for me, I think that's gonna be the expensive driver that gives us a safer floor. And then Keselowski and Logano. I think Keselowski probably of the 3 is gonna be the least owned, but Logano is really interesting because he has long-term success, but in the next gen car, we see a lot of finishes towards we're talking about he's starting in the top 10 every single one of these races, and he's finishing somewhere in the 20s or even the 30s. So what is happening with Logano at Talladega, and could we see a turnaround? I love going after him. I think that maybe we get him in a lower qualifying spot, and he finally takes a different approach to this race, especially given the circumstances. So we see a lot of momentum with him. He just won a race in a comparable track a few weeks ago. I like going after Logano and maybe a spot where we get some relatively or decently low ownership.
I'll tell you why Logano is that way. He's feast or famine at these tracks because he makes his car 4 lanes wide. He is one of
I was just going to get into that too.
One of the most aggressive blockers you will ever see at super speedway racing. So what he does is he fights his way up to the front. And Brad Keselowski is kind of this way too. They both learned this from each other, I feel like, as teammates. But they'll both get up to the front, and then whoever has the lead, you will watch them go up and down that track aggressively blocking. I don't know, Sean, in your opinion, is there anyone more aggressive with the block than Joey Logano?
I don't think when it comes to these sorts of tracks, Logano is the most aggressive driver. We see a few others come close. I think Brad is up there too, even though he drives for RFK. Brad used to learn about this way, way, way back in the day from one of the best to ever do it at these kinds of tracks, Dale Earnhardt Jr. So he was Junior's protege for a while, and he picked up all that success from him. He's won 6 times at Talladega in the past, and another driver that I'm going to also throw my hat into there as far as the aggression is concerned nowadays is Michael McDowell, though, because he's been really bad, really doing that a lot.
And not you know who scaled back? You know who scaled back a little bit that used to be really bad about it was Hamlin. Hamlin used to be one of the more aggressive blockers. I've noticed he's not nearly as aggressive as he used to be on the super speedways.
No, definitely not.
But look, I have no problem with the group that any of the drivers these 2 gentlemen have named. I'm being somewhat of a douche. I'm waiting for qualifying. I love the Penske guys. I love the Ford guys, but I don't want anyone in my DFS lineups that is starting in the top 10.
Seriously. No, I mean,
valid.
It's honestly like, we're going to make some recommendations here, but this can all change based off of what qualifying looks like.
Yeah.
100%.
And we can already get a sense of who might do really well in qualifying based on past trends and precedent and the equipment that's on display, but it's still not a given, especially if, say, for example, we have a driver where maybe they don't pass pre-qualifying inspection. They're going to start at the rear, and then that's going to turn them into chalk perhaps there. This is why we have to keep an eye on it, especially because, well, some drivers are going to do really well. Others are not going to do well in qualifying.
And, this may be, we talk about chasing chalk. If there is any places where I wouldn't chase chalk in NASCAR, It's the super speedways. Like you can get away with being way off the grid on all the picks and not being far off from anyone's lineup as far as points wise, cashing wise, that sort of thing. So, but look, you've got to believe that Logano. In fact, I was shocked by Logano's odds, to be honest with you. He is feast or famine, Mark. He can be very frustrating, but I'll promise you this: we will see the 22 at the front at some point during this race. We will probably see the 22 at the front for a good chunk of this race. Where the 22 finishes, I will not make a bet with you on that one. I will promise you it'll either be inside the top 10 or outside of 20th. I doubt it will be in between.
Oh, yeah. I kind of have to agree with you there. And you even look back towards the last couple of finishes at Daytona or Talladega combined. You look at the amount of laps led that Logano has, it's quite high up there. But,
like
the visuals don't show for it.
I just don't know anyone that can block 2 or 3 lanes as well as him, which is always funny to me that he got so mad about Matt Kenseth blocking him at Kansas, right? Like, I know I hammer home the Joey the hypocrite thing, but it's because of stuff like that. His actions don't match up with his words, and he's not really understanding of that and doesn't understand where people get upset. But more later. We don't need to get on a Joey bash here. So, mid-tier picks. Hit us, Sean.
So with the mid-tier options, I got the only Team Penske driver that basically isn't in the top price tier. That's Austin Cindric there. I've got Alex Bowman and then Chase Briscoe. I think out of these three, we know that Cindric's going to be a contender at this track just because of the equipment right there. Bowman, he generally runs pretty solidly at these types of tracks. He usually finishes around top 15 at Daytona or Talladega, but I do also want to give a shout out towards Chase Briscoe in particular. Within the last couple of races at Daytona and Talladega combined, I think, what is it? Like the last 4 or 5 races in a row, he's finished top 15 or better. That's very hard to do at these kinds of tracks. And I think we have to also consider Chase Briscoe. He's one of those playoff drivers. He is behind the playoff cutoff line by a decent margin. I'm willing to think he's going to try his best in order to really get up there and score a solid finish this time around. He's going to be one to watch, I'm saying, especially for the salary. He's easy to slot in on any format.
I love Chase Briscoe. I have him too, Sean. So I'm with you on Briscoe. I have a hard time though. I have 4 here, and this is where I kind of was saying I don't know that I'll do much in the high values. I'm with you on Austin Cindric. I think Michael McDowell's worth keeping an eye on. I think you're spot on with Chase Briscoe, but I tell you what, Sean, I don't know that I can fade Austin Dillon.
That's interesting considering my whole thing with Austin Dillon is a lot like Joey Logano, too. He has good cars at these sorts of tracks, but finishing-wise, especially within, like, say, the whole past year since 2023 alone, he hasn't had the finishes to show for it, and that's what makes me a little bit iffy about Austin in particular. If you were going to give me an RCR driver to trust, I would much rather spend up and get Kyle Busch, especially because he's been won at Talladega before, more recently, and also you have to remember, Daytona happened just before the playoffs, and he was in contention to win that race right there, too.
That's the thing, right? So, I don't know. I probably won't use him. I'd rather have Briscoe, but that's kind of where I'm at. But what says you, Mark? It looks like we got a little bit of overlap as well.
Yeah, I really like Alex Bowman. I think he's driving well right now. I mean, he finished 5th in this race back in the spring, so I'm a big fan of him at $7,600. I think that's a nice value play. It's probably going to be a little bit chalkier for some of those reasons. I think, Cindric and McDowell are really interesting because you have 2 guys that are looking at bounce backs going to the race back in the spring. For example, Michael McDowell, he started on the pole back in the spring, and then he finished 31st, where, if we look at Austin Cindric, he started 2nd and finished 23rd. So both of these guys went towards the front. I see this as a redemption spot on a track that they can certainly claim redemption on. That's why I'm into those 2 as well.
Also, I'm just going to piggyback off of the Cindric comics there. We have to also remember Cindric is a playoff driver too. He needs in order to have some solid runs in order to advance. And you can sure bet, considering how well Penske does at these types of tracks, he has this race circled.
Yeah, I would say this one's circled for Austin Cindric because unlike Joey and the rest of them, I don't think he's going to feel nearly as confident advancing in other avenues.
Yeah, keep an eye on Cindric this week.
Yep.
Let's get
well, all three of us have Cindric, so I mean, what does that tell you? Literally, all three of us have Cindric, and then the other two drivers, you have two, I have. I mean, literally, me and Mark have two, you and Mark have two, Sean, me and you have. I mean, we completely overlap on this tier across the board.
But then it's like, what happens if Austin Cindric qualifies third?
Honestly,
tournament play.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a contrarian tournament play. You bring up a really good point though, Mark. It's not a lineup I'm going to push because I'm still going back to I want to find people that start 20th or later.
I think you could push it to 15th though if you're looking at these like 7K type of drivers. If you're looking at like a $7,400 driver and he's qualifying 16th,
that's fair.
I think that's going to pay off.
That's fair.
Yeah, pretty valid.
Get mid-pack or worse.
Yeah. But they have to be there. Like, it's like if they do any better and a guy like Cindric and McDowell, they could easily qualify in the top 5.
Well,
earlier in the spring.
I was going to say one thing is the Fords are going to qualify better than the other cars. At least I will be shocked if they don't, because this same package we've seen for the end of last year and into this year now, the Fords they're going to kind of have a new nose. They're making changes for next year, so this will get fixed. But for right now, I'm struggling to avoid the Fords, and you're spot on. You know, in this next group here, for example, I have Todd Gilliland. I believe Todd Gilliland qualified inside the top 10 in the spring here.
Yeah, actually, I think what was it? Even at Daytona just there, I think he was on the front row with his teammate Michael McDowell there.
Right. So, you bring up a really, really good point there, Mark, that, some of these guys we really like, Austin Cindric qualified second, right? We may have to, I don't want to say eat crow, but we may have to, pivot for a tournament play. Yeah, Gilliland started third.
Yeah, there you go. I think qualifying here, getting into the sleepers and bargains, the sleepers and values here, some of my picks, I made that in mind, particularly with qualifying a little bit more and predicting how some of these drivers are going to do that I think we should watch for. Now,
way to play
I know,
chess. I did not.
I know we're on Corey LaJoie, of course, and Anthony Alfredo. We have to remember, even though Corey LaJoie is now in a Ford with Rick Ware Racing, that Rick Ware Ford, even with Justin Haley, was not always qualifying high up there usually,
right.
too.
But it did finish well. Justin Haley had some nice finishes in that car.
Yeah. And then Anthony Alfredo, I've said it earlier, Alfredo's a driver I love for this week. He's very, very cheap on all the sites. And basically that Beard Motorsports 62, here's the thing about it. They're going to have a technical alliance with RCR. You know how good those RCR cars are, right? Think about it.
On the big tracks. On the big tracks. Yep. No, in fact, I forgot about Anthony Alfredo, and I didn't go down the list far enough. I'm ashamed I don't have him in my list. I would probably put him in, given how good Gilliland's qualified, I'd probably put him in over Gilliland. I'm feeling like a Gilliland race is happening. This dude is going to win at one of these super speedways like his dad did. Like, I just see it happening.
I think it's certainly plausible. He's ran well before at these types of tracks. But you know what, though? We didn't talk about the last driver that's on my list there, too, which I was wondering if you guys are going to bring this up as well. Daniel Hemrick.
I want to hear about it because I wasn't anywhere near that, so I'm all ears.
So my whole logic is this. I know Hemrick, he's not going to qualify well at these types of tracks. He usually qualifies in the 20s or 30s almost every single time with Colic Racing equipment. Have you looked at his last couple of finishes at super speedways at Daytona and Talladega? It's actually really, really quite astounding when you look forth at that.
Well, let's see. Started 19th, finished 9th in the last one.
28th at Daytona to start, and then finished 9th there too. 16th at the Daytona 500 this year after starting in the 37th spot. Just this year alone, he's been making that Colic Racing equipment look very, very good as far as finishing the races. And what have we said about Daniel Hemrick all year, Rich? Hemrick finishes races.
Yeah, he finishes races. So in 5 Talladega races, he has 1 top 5 and 2 top 10s. That's actually pretty good for a guy that qualifies back in the 30s. Average finish, 21. Average start, 13.8, which I don't know where they're getting the average start from. But
And think about it this way. I will say, think about it this way. So compare Haley to Hemrick, and you could pretty much the same profile you just gave to Hemrick, you could give to Haley, except Hemrick's price point is much, much lower. So I think it's a valid point that you're making, is that we could see a lot of ownership go towards Haley, where we could get the same type of points or place differential and total points out of Hemrick.
Exactly. And the thing is that people don't think Hemrick is going to place that well. He doesn't usually place too high at most races, but that Kaulig racing car, though, we have to keep that in mind because that's a pretty decent car. And they also share some of the same equipment that RCR even uses at some of these tracks as well, too. So,
but it's the same logic too, where the place differential basically comes from jumping the guys that, wreck or fall back in the pack due to spinning out or whatever it might be. So I like it, man. I think it's a great contrarian way to fade the Haley ownership, which I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see some nice ownership on Haley.
Especially because you have to remember too there, Mark. Haley's not in Rick Ware Racing Equipment anymore. He's in Spire Equipment.
I think it's better. Well, yeah. I mean, I think
didn't run well this week. He didn't run this well with this week. I think Spire needs to get Rodney Childers over to that car ASAP. I think that's part of it. Now, we have seen Corey LaJoie in this same 7 car run very, very well at these super speedways. Justin Haley does have a NASCAR Cup win, and it has come at a super speedway. He also has an Xfinity win that came at a super speedway. So he is very savvy at this type of racing. And to both of your points, we could argue Rick Ware has been pretty good. And of all the tracks we go to, I would not be shocked to see them do well. Like Sean and I talked earlier in the year, we were kind of shocked at how well Rick Ware was finishing races or the equipment was holding up. So I think there's something to be said for that. But Spire's aspirations are to be, at the very least, they want to be in the same conversations as Front Row, who considers themselves more or less the number 2 Ford team behind Penske, right? And that's really where Spire wants to kind of be in. They're not going to be the Hendricks. They're not going to be the number 1 Chevy teams. But if they can be on par with RCR, for example, who right now is definitely a step back, we should be fine, right? So I kind of like Haley this week. They had a bad run this last week. I kind of want to see what we got.
I just think the one thing to keep in mind is Hemrick, the price point. Haley is priced up for what he is.
Well,
so Hemrick and Haley, it's almost like, hey, Haley could command 35% ownership and Hemrick could command 3%.
Well, this is the conversation we need to have more of, Mark. Okay, this is where I'm saying I'm in the wrong frame of mind. I want Haley because Haley I think will finish better than Hemrick. I don't think anybody is doubting or disputing that. However, for building our lineups in DFS, we want more points or money, depending on how we want to change our lineup. So aren't we better off taking a guy that's going to start 10 places further back, that's a little cheaper, that is less owned, that we think can score enough place differential points to be as good as Haley scores in general? Yeah, that's a better approach, right? I mean, because we're looking at one, maybe Hemricks are contrarian. It's not really contrarian, but you know what I mean? Are off play that people aren't on. That now when we're chalky with some of the other stuff, and again, maybe this is the week to not be chalk, right? Because it's such a wild card deal. But my point is your thought process on how we're approaching points. We need to chase points. We're not chasing finishing positions. We're chasing points. Who gives us more points for dollars?
Yeah. And we don't know that point ceiling until qualifying happens. That's the thing. Because what if we get Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, and 3 other top-tier drivers all starting 30th or further back?
Oh,
right? I mean, we have a bunch of chalk. Now all of them we have to start to try and fit in our lineups. And the point ceiling for what we're expecting for that optimal lineup or first place is going to probably get elevated. So it really depends, man. It all comes down to what happens in qualifying and how many of these guys pan out and don't pan out.
And that's why I also say watch for pre-qualifying inspection, because that's really where the difference could potentially be.
Because we may have somebody that's starting in the back because they didn't get through tech through the first 3 times. And what that tells us most likely, and I don't know how much you followed some of this, Mark, but I think this is where Sean's going with it. They're on the very cusp of the tolerances, which means they may be the fastest cars out there. Like, we're not shocked when the car that didn't pass inspection 5 times is the fastest car. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little correlation there that they don't necessarily want us to connect, but it's the truth of it. I mean, they're using lasers and they have to bend things back and get within spec. But here again, you fail inspection 3 times, you lose your car chief, you go to the back of the field, you lose your pit spot selection.
You don't even qualify.
And you don't qualify. Right. So now, because where we got to be careful is when you do qualify and say you got to do an engine change, wherever you qualified is where you start versus, years ago, they used to say, well, you go to the back and that's the qualifying position you get. We don't do that anymore. You're now given whatever you qualified at, whether you have to go back. But if you're not allowed to qualify or your time is disallowed, then you're credited with that 37th, 38th place position, starting position.
Exactly.
So that's a very good point, though, Mark. I'm telling you, between the 3 of us, we're going to figure this shit out, and people are going to have a hard time here. So I'm the little kamikaze part. Mark is the savvy, play all the angles, make sure you're getting the points, really maximize it. And Sean brings the hard-hitting numbers of where these guys have been at that I just can't spout off the top of his head like he does. So I tell you what, we got a little bit of everything here, guys. And it's funny when we see so much overlap on the same drivers then, because we all are looking at different things, to be honest.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, let's get into some betting.
Let's get to our core fours. So.
Oh, my bad. I'm getting excited to bet.
The betting core fours, actually. So I'll go first and roll mine off here. I've got Ryan Blaney at plus 900, Brad Kay at plus 900, William Byron at plus 1,300, and Austin Cindric at plus 2,000 in order to win. I have a long shot winner of Chase Briscoe at plus 4,000, or if you really want to get super, super deep, Daniel Hemrick and Anthony Alfredo are both at plus 8,000 to outright win. How about that?
I like that. In fact, I'm going to change one of mine now. These were all gut shots. They are based on stories, based on history of where they've run, based on what's happening next year, based on what I think happened. I've got one guy in here I think I'd like to pivot from, though. Todd Gilliland, plus 5,000, so 50-1. Bubba Wallace, look, until Bubba Wallace wins a full race here, I will pick him to win because the story will want that to happen. He's only 18-1, but I still say he's being kind of forgotten about. He runs well here. Noah Gragson at plus 5,000. I kind of would like to change that to Anthony Alfredo or Chase Briscoe, or both. So I like that. But the other name I threw out, and again, it's kind of more of a gut shot, Austin Dillon at 35-1.
Right on. I like that. Mark, give us your betting core for here. What do you got?
I got Ryan Blaney at plus 900, Brad Keselowski plus 900, and Joey Logano at plus 900. So obviously I'm Team Penske. I didn't go after Austin Cindric, but Alex Bowman I threw in there at plus 2,800. And then my long shot is Justin Haley. We just talked a lot about him, and he's plus 5,500. So certainly a nice return on a guy that we could absolutely see take a race like this. So this was something I threw together pretty close leading up to the show. And one thing I do like to point out is I like Rich's approach in going after some of these stories and almost sprinkling in more long shots just in general for this race. Like, this is a core four for betting winners. But if there's going to be any race where you're going to sprinkle in more long shots, this is going to be the one.
This is the one. In fact, I would almost rather say, normally I'm only betting 3-4 guys, right? A race like this, I would love to bet, say, 10 guys at $1 or $2.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being real cheap here, right? But I mean, if you can bet on 10 of these guys at a couple of bucks, you win 36 on Bubba's, and that's the highest, that's the shortest odds I've been looking at, right? I happen to love the Justin Haley call at 5,500. I love the Alfredo call at 8,000. I think those are both brilliant calls. I think Cindric, to your guys' point, maybe we should take a look at him. Look, if you want to chase long shots and just kind of have fun, this is the race to do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say leading up into Talladega's spring race, I want to say that they said nobody had won the super speedway races in the last 5 or something like that with odds of less than 30-1. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Very interesting and intriguing. Let's move on to our DFS core force to close out the show here real quick. I got Ryan Blaney, 10,000 on DraftKings, 14,000 on FanDuel, most expensive driver on both sites. I got his Penske teammate Austin Cindric at 8,100 on DK and 9,500 on FanDuel. Like the price there. Chase Briscoe at 7,300 for DraftKings and 6,000. He's especially cheap on FanDuel. And then Corey LaJoie, 5,700 on DraftKings and then 4,000 on FanDuel. I know I said I like Anthony Alfredo a lot, but for DFS, I'm going to go with the safer and more experienced option, just who I think is going to qualify really deep in the field and then just come through the field, get myself a top 20, top 15, maybe even a top 10 with Corey LaJoie there. And I think he's like the nice balance where of qualifying deep, but also having the history in order to prove that he can make it up through the field. Rich, hit us with your DFS core for next.
So I copped out because I have nobody in mind until we see qualifying. We've harped on this, and Mark may have convinced me to soften my stance a little bit because I said here I wouldn't take anyone inside the top 20. That said, one piece of advice I would use: feel free to hedge your DFS lineup with the long shot or the bets we've talked about. So, like what Sean just said, he's going to put a little bit of money on Anthony Alfredo. Then don't use Anthony Alfredo in your lineup. If you want to use Anthony Alfredo in your lineup, then go put a bet in on Daniel Hemrick or something. Just that's how I would approach this week. It's going to be a wild card. I don't have a problem with any of these guys. I want to find ways, though, to get at least a group 2 or 3 out of my mid-tier group and 2 to 3 out of the low-tier group. Like I'm hoping, I would love to see Todd Gilliland qualify poorly because you're right. If he's going to qualify top 5, I can't do it. Maybe a tournament play. But I tell you what, I learned last spring. I just threw a lineup together with people that started 30th or worse, names I didn't even care about. I left almost $20,000 in the bank, and it cashed. So once we get to qualifying, I'll have some names.
In the meantime, Mark, give us the names that you're liking so far.
Yeah, I have to throw out just strategy real quick. I like what Rich had just pointed out. And even just to take that a little bit further, NASCAR, there's a lot of NASCAR bets out there. You can do group bets and you can also do head-to-head bets. So you can get very specific with how you're hedging your DFS lineups through bets like that. And I also I'm starting to really like doing almost, it's like stacks in other sports, but just stacking manufacturers. So going hard after Chevys or because look, we saw this race where we had manufacturers teaming up earlier in the spring and it didn't work out for the Fords, but that can easily happen on a track like this. So I like that concept. And I just have to add from a DFS standpoint before I give my guys, I'm going multiple lineups this week. I'm going light. This is a race to go light on, but I am going to go multiple lineups. And so I really like spreading out my exposure on a track like this because there's just so much that's out of our control and what can happen. I've got Blaney. I've got Eric Jones. We didn't talk about Eric Jones, but Eric Jones is like my perfect value play that I don't think is going to go low owned. I think his previous 2 races, he's finished towards the back, but then the previous 4 behind that's still within the next gen car at Talladega, he's finished within the top 10. So I really like Eric Jones at 6,200 and 3,800 on FanDuel. Joey Logano, Team Penske, that's where I'm at with that. And Justin Haley, of course, we've already talked about the reasons why I like him. So, but again, you're not going to see me just play a lineup with this core 4. I'm going to be mixing and matching with a lot of the other drivers that we just referenced, and your guys' core 4 is here as well.
So let me say this about I love your strategy here. Let me say this about Eric Jones. You know how I've told you guys that there's always a driver or 2 that when I'm doing the write-ups and come back that I always come back to, but I can't seem to find something to hang my hat on. But I always see their name, and then I use them or I don't use them, but it seems like that name ends up being like someone solid to use. Eric Jones was that guy when we were doing the show sheet today. I looked at Eric Jones about 4 different times. I didn't know off the top of my head. I kept thinking, I'm glad you shared those stats, Mark, because I couldn't remember them off the top of my head. I was like, I feel like he's done decent here, but it looks like the last couple, not so much. I think that Eric Jones calls a very savvy pick right there. And I don't know about you, Sean, but I don't think Eric Jones is going to qualify well.
Nah, I don't think he's going to qualify too well either. So, especially because Legacy Motor Club with those Toyotas, I mean, they haven't been qualifying really that good all year long, regardless of track type. Maybe occasionally you'll see a solid run or two. Like this past weekend at Kansas, we saw Eric Jones actually qualify around 16th or so. But I don't think that's like a typical every week sort of situation there. Also, I do get the point about Mark saying drivers that you kind of just keep coming back to maybe and just considering. For me, I'm going to throw one other name out there that we haven't really talked about much today, Christopher Bell. So there you go.
I dig that.
Yeah.
I dig that. I can see that. And hey, let's not forget Eric Jones' teammate did lead laps here in the spring, John Hunter. So
yeah,
we've seen that before. Well, I'm not saying go to John Hunter, but my point is, it's not uncommon at these tracks to see him qualify poorly and yet them race fast. Does that make sense? So,
yes.
100%.
So I'm on the Jones pick. I think, John Hunter's probably a decent hedge. He's a little more wild card. He does have excellent history in Xfinity at these tracks. But you're right. In Cup 2. You're right. So, guys, this was excellent. I know we went long again. I apologize. I get wordy. But, man, this is some really great info. I'm excited for this weekend. I'm with you guys. Scaling back total dollars thrown out there, more lineups, and I'm getting kind of freaky with it. Not a freak off. Don't call me P. Diddy, but I am going to get
No, this is a race where honestly go ahead and just pick 5 random drivers. You might have a great shot at scoring very high in the tournament. The other thing too, though, is I think this is a race where you can easily target 6 drivers in a DraftKings lineup and leave like $7,000 on the table, and they all have great place differential and low ownership. So look out for an opportunity like that, and definitely be more willing to leave money on the table than other races.
100%. I'm not joking when I said I left them. It was somewhere between 14 and 20 grand. All it was, Mark, was I'm sitting here. I worked so hard. I had these 5 lineups, and I'm kind of twisted, and I'm digging them. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do a complete hedge. I'm just going to F around. So I went in there, and all I did was scroll to see 30th, 33rd, 38th, and just started finding. I kid you not, there wasn't a single driver in that lineup that started better than 30th, and that was the only lineup I had that cashed.
Yeah.
I broke even because of it. I literally broke even because of it. And I'm not joking. There was 15, 20, somewhere between 14 and 20K that I left because all the drivers that started back that far were, I think the most expensive driver I had was $7,400 or something like that. So spot on.
I mean, just think about it. If you sprinkle in 6 different long shot bets, well, maybe not every single one of them can win the race, but what if all of your long shot bets panned out? Imagine just throwing them all in a DFS lineup and what happens then.
Yeah, because we don't need the long shot bets if they just finish top 5, top 10. That's a big win. And you got a whole lineup of these guys. It's going to be tough to match. I mean, you may not win the whole tournament. It may not be a perfect lineup. But I tell you what, if you could get 5 lineups to cash somewhere within range, it'd be a decent day. So, look, on behalf of Fantasy Guru, please go to fantasyguru.com. Hit the subscribe button. Look, I know you want more info from Mark. I know you want more info from Sean. Apparently, you guys tagged me a ton in Discord already, so keep that up. We'll have fun. We'll answer NASCAR. We'll talk NASCAR, talk football. And then, look, I recommend you all don't, pick Mark's brain and Sean's brain a little bit here, guys. I mean, Mark is very savvy at his angles of DFS that I'm stealing from and using. And I tell everybody all the time, there is so much stuff that Sean spits out that I'm like, crap, I forgot about that. Or, oh my God, I didn't even realize that. So don't sleep, man. Use us, hit us up, ask us. Don't waste our time though with silly questions on who do I start on Sunday is all I'm saying. All right. We're talking NASCAR here, not football. Okay. So I'll leave it at that. But hey, go over to Fantasy Guru, hit the subscribe button, figure out there's plenty of packages. If you're not 100% sure what you want to do, email support@fantasyguru.com. Tell Ted, you'll send him a carton of cigarettes. Tell him what you're looking for. He'll recommend probably the best opportunity for you. There's got to be something we aim to please, right? So on behalf of the RaceGuru Thunder Hour, that is Sean Engel. You can find him on the Xbox at SeanE247. Don't forget to hit up DFS Marlin Mark Hogan, who you can find on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, DFS_Marlin. You know, you got an easy name. You would think I could spit it out. And hey, whatever you do, don't follow me on X. I'm Fantasy Bosco. I am also known as Rich Maletto. You can find us on the next podcast. We'll see you next week.